Hello, here I am again in the name of the sovereign creator, the Lord Jesus Christ. We're continuing with a series on Genesis that I am expounding, commenting on my translation of Genesis. We've come now to chapter 6, which will be about the flood. Actually, several chapters are about the flood. We'll stick with just chapter 6, verse 1 through 3 to begin. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took to themselves wives of all whom they chose. Then Jehovah said, My spirit will not contend with man forever because of his sinning. He is flesh, his days will be 120 years. Verse 2, the sons of God. That phrase translates the Hebrew phrase Bene Ha-Elohim, which in the other places where it occurs, namely Job 1:6, Job 2:11, 2:1, and 38:7, clearly refers to angelic beings and apparently high-ranking ones. The inspired commentary in the New Testament in Jude verses 6 and 7 and 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 4 through 7 makes it clear that they were indeed angelic beings, sons of God. In this case, ones who had rebelled against God. Jude makes it clear that the phrase in Genesis 6:2 is no exception. Quote, I'm reading now Jude, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but deserted their own dwelling. My comment, apparently they could not return. He has kept bound in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. So also Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns, who gave themselves up to fornication and went after a different kind of flesh, that's the Greek word heteros, in a manner similar to those angels, stand as an example undergoing a punishment of eternal fire. Jude 6 and 7. You may recall that the eternal lake contains fire and brimstone, and that's what came down on Sodom and Gomorrah. Going on, the author, inspired by God, affirms that the people of Sodom did what certain angelic beings did. They wanted sex with a different kind of flesh. Remember that the men of Sodom, old and young from every neighborhood, wanted to rape the angels who were with Lot. Genesis 19, 4 through and 5. Now then, whatever kind of flesh an angel has when he materializes, it is not human flesh. It is precisely a different kind of flesh. The parallel text in 2 Peter 2, verses 4 through 6, links the crime of those angels to the flood. Check it. In Matthew 22:30, Mark 12:25, Luke 20:35, the Lord does not say that angels are sexless. Evidently, baby angels are not born whether good or bad, but if angels are of only one gender, they cannot reproduce. There are no female angels. In the Bible, whenever an angel materializes, he does so in the form of a man, not a woman. Just by the way, you should check 1 Corinthians 11:10, which is very serious, because of the angels. Now in verse 3, because of his sinning. That particular saying of the Creator has received a variety of interpretations. I always ask for the enlightenment of the Holy Spirit when I'm translating, and I put what I understood. Goes right on, and then God says he is flesh. The Creator recognizes the limitations imposed on us by our fallen flesh. Satan's natural ally within us. Now it closes, verse 3 says, man's days will be 120 years. After the flood, the age of men gradually decreased, but Moses still lived 120 years, about 500 years later. However, I understand that the intended meaning here is different. God was predicting the flood, which would destroy everyone except the 120 years from that moment. That's my understanding. I can't prove that, of course. Just the way I understand it. Now let's read verses 4 through 7. Job chapter 6. In those days there were Nephilim on the earth, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men, and they bore them sons. These were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And Jehovah saw that the wickedness of man had multiplied upon the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Then Jehovah lamented that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And Jehovah said, I will blot out the man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and animal, and creeping thing, and even birds of the air, because I lament having made them. For the moment. Verse 4, I want to comment, and also afterward. That refers to what happened after the flood. Obviously, after the flood, there were no longer a single daughter of Cain. So those three words close the issue against the thesis of the so-called sons of Shem being the sons of God. No way. From Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 10 through 12, and verses 20 through 21, we can understand that already in the time of Abraham and even before, other mixed races had emerged with impressive size. Deuteronomy 3:11 expressly says that Og, the king of Bashan, was the last of his race, the Rephaim, who were similar to the Anakim. And it also says that his bed was about 4.5 meters long, which allows us to imagine that Og himself was probably about 4 meters tall. 38 years earlier, the spies wanting to defame the land spoke of a number of giants, sons of Anak, who are specifically called Nephilim. That's in Numbers 13, verse 33. 400 years later, David still had to face Goliath and others of his race, the Rephaim, 1 Chronicles 24 through 8, except that Goliath's height was only 3 meters, not 4. 1 Samuel 17, verse 4. Evidently, the severity used by God in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah indicates that the level of wickedness there was unusual. Although the text does not directly speak of giants in Sodom, we can deduce that there were, because Deuteronomy 2, 10 through 12 says that Moab, who occupied what was left of the area controlled by Sodom and Gomorrah, that didn't wind up under the Dead Sea, took the area from the Emim, who were the same size as the Anakim. It appears that there were several mixed races of that type. Now then, verse 5. This is really bad, okay? Every intention of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. This description indicates that something strange had happened. Okay, an ordinary human being is certainly capable of doing bad things and perpetrating perverse deeds, no problem. But not 100% of the time, okay? Unless they are fully surrendered to Satan. There are a few people like that around. But the hybrid offspring, on the other hand, would be totally bad. Just think about it for a moment. According to Jude 18 and 19, quote, in the last time, end quote, men will be, quote, soulish. That is to say, they'll be characterized by soul. That's the Greek word psychikoi. And Jude goes on to say, not having a spirit. That is just what the text says. Your Bible probably says not having the Spirit, and S to the capital S, but in the text there is no definite article. Further, the description of such people that occupies Jude 8 through 16 is beyond scathing. It is a totally wicked race. It reminds us of Genesis 6:5 and 2 Timothy 3:1 through 5. The question is exactly this: would a demon's offspring have a spirit? We know from the sacred text that the human spirit is transmitted by the male sperm, so that hybrid race had lost the human spirit and presumably the image of God as well. Consider the following. In all genealogies, it is always the man who begets, a woman bears. It seems to me that Hebrews chapter 7, verses 9 and 10 closes the issue. Quote, in a word, even Levi, who receives tithes, paid the tithe through Abraham because he was still in the reproductive system of his forefather when Melchizedek met him, end quote. Well, when Abraham paid the tithe to Melchizedek, not even Isaac had been begotten, much less Jacob and Levi. However, the inspired author states that the person of Levi was in Abraham's reproductive system. So it is the seed of man that transmits life, the human spirit, and the image of the Creator. Just by the way, that is why Romans 5:12 through 21 teaches that Adam's sin passed on to all his descendants and death as well. When Eve sinned, she sinned alone. She alone sinned. But when Adam sinned, we all did too. That is a calamity the size of the world. Okay, let's go on now and read verses 8 through 12. But Noah found favor in Jehovah's eyes. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous and upright man among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God. And Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked at the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all the people had corrupted their way upon the earth. I just want to comment one thing here. It says in verse 8 that Noah found favor in Jehovah's eyes. Dear me. Have you ever thought about the results of that, quote, favor? Noah had to spend his entire time during perhaps 100 years building an ark to protect his family from something that did not exist. Before the flood, during 1,600 years, it had never rained. No rain. And without rain, there could be no flood. Okay. No, poor Noah. He was the laughing stock of the surrounding community for all those years. And it took a lot of work, all right, to build that big boat. And after the flood, have you thought about that? After the flood, his life was certainly dreary. Oh dear, compared to what he had known before. Would you like to receive a favor like that? However, Noah lived for 350 years after the flood, and things certainly got a lot better as time went by. Now I want to read verses 13 through 17. Then God said to Noah, The end of every living being has come before me, because the earth is full of violence through them. Yes, indeed, I will destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make compartments in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. And this is how you must make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, and its width, 50 cubits, and its height, 30 cubits. You must make a window in the ark, a cubit high, covered on the top. And you must set the door of the ark in its side. You must make it with stories, lower, second, and third. I myself really am bringing a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which there is the breath of life under heaven. Everything on the earth will perish. Jehovah continues, but let's stop there for a moment. Now, verse 14, I kept the word gopher. That is simply a transliteration of the Hebrew word. And as a matter of fact, we are not sure about its meaning. However, a piece of a squared beam had been worked on, about 5,000 years old, that's based on carbon 14, was found near Ararat. And it is a type of oak. So it's quite likely that gopher was a kind of oak. I can't prove it, just for what it's worth. You will make compartments in the ark. Just think about that. There had to be rooms, okay, or pens, so that each type of animal could have its own space. This would keep them from roaming around and causing fights. It would also keep them from going after the food, okay? You've got to ration things. But that meant that the people had to take food and water to the animals, which would give them something to do with all their time. Not that bad, all right? Verse 15, the dimensions of the ark could be used for modern ship. It would be about the length of the size of a football field with the end zones. However, as the purpose of the ark was only to float, not to navigate, the structure may have been a rectangle with a flat bottom, which would have given, by the way, the maximum space for those dimensions. Just think about that. But it would also be easier to build, all right? Incidentally, the New Testament refers to Noah's Ark as well as the Ark of the Covenant with the Greek word kibotos. That means box or chest. You can see that in Matthew 24:38 and Hebrews 9:4. Just by the way, the Hebrew word translated ark also means a box or a chest. Of course, both can be square, but they are more commonly rectangular. In fact, we know that the Ark of the Covenant was indeed a rectangle. It was a rectangular box. Since the width was much greater than the height, going back now to Noah's Ark, the Ark was very stable. Now think about that. The width was a whole lot greater than the height. So Noah's Ark was very stable. Now, verse 16 talks about one window. Naturally, the ark needed a roof, probably of wood covered with pitch. The window was covered, right? The window separated the roof from the walls and ran around the circumference of the entire ark. As there were no ordinary windows in the walls, the larger window was needed to provide air and light inside the ark. And there was just one door, which got closed. So you needed that window to provide air. Lots of animals in there breathing, okay? Not to die asphyxiated. Light. Verse 17. Jehovah says that he is going to destroy all flesh in which there is the breath of life under heaven. Everything on the earth will perish. Obviously, Jehovah was not talking about a local flood, okay? Jehovah spoke of the destruction of the surface of the whole earth, as a matter of fact happened. Okay, to finish this video, let's read verses 18 through 22. Jehovah was still speaking, but with you I will establish my covenant, and you will enter into the ark, you and your sons, your wife and your sons' wives with you. And of all that lives, of all flesh, 2 of each kind you will take into the ark to preserve them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, of the animals after their kind, of everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. 2 of each will come to you to keep them alive. And you take for yourself of all food that is eaten and store it up for yourself, that it may be food for you and for them. End quote. Then Noah did according to all that God commanded him, so he did. Now, verse 18, with you I will establish my covenant. Look, why did God not just destroy everything and start all over again? Why bother with and why did he need a covenant with Noah? I suppose that the answer harks back to chapter 3, verse 15. The Redeemer had to be a descendant of Adam and Eve. Therefore, Noah and Shem carried Adam's genes beyond the flood. And that's why God didn't destroy everything and start over from scratch. That's the way I see it anyway. Now, verse 20. 2 of each will come to you. Well, yeah, really, obviously. Okay. God brought all the animals to be saved to the ark. It had to be that way. It would be impossible for poor Noah to go after them. He wouldn't even know where to find them. Oh, yeah. He wouldn't even know how many there were. God brought them. Okay. Now, verse 21, about this bit about the food. Not just for the 8 people, but also all the animals, all right? Remember that they were all herbivores until after the flood. So God must have given Noah a hint as to how much he should store. Why? Because only God knew that they would stay a whole year in the ark. Only God knew that, all right? So Noah, etc., probably also brought seeds of the fruits, vegetables, and grains that they liked best so they could plant them when they left the ark. The animals, everyone ate vegetation, right? The animals would be probably as if in hibernation, sort of like a semi-hibernation, eating relatively little and producing little manure, which of course kept the people busy getting rid of it, right? Just about the larger animals, God may have brought juveniles, still small, okay? So you didn't have huge dinosaurs and huge elephants. Okay. Next video will carry on with the flood, but for now, that's it. Thanks for watching and God bless.